What's going on, guys? Anime Okage back at it again, and today we're going to be jumping into Jujutsu Kaisen Chapter 263. Sorry about all the lack of videos lately. I've been really busy with a move and moving a lot of other people. It's just a tree fell down in my front yard, and then my basement started leaking from the chimney. It has just been one thing after another. But finally, I can get back to putting out these videos for you very regularly. And without further ado, let's just jump right into it. So, in the very first chapter, when we jump back in, we're seeing that unlimited void domain that's the size of like a basketball to increase the density of it so it won't break. We're seeing that start to rupture. And I believe it's starting to rupture because of the just super immense amount of power that is happening within the barrier. Because as we know in the continuation of 262, the part two of that, Yuta, Gojo or Gota, Yujo, we're gonna go Gota. He actually released a hollow purple at Sukuna, and this took Sukuna by surprise because Sukuna said that he does not have enough time in order to learn this ultimate technique and use it with this enough efficiency. But as we know, because of the plot armor that Sukuna holds in the series, he is seen flying out of the domain and he is landing on his own 2 feet, and he's not really maimed by this. He still has his other 2 arms, although his skin looks really burned and charred, which we know isn't a giant damage indicator because reverse curse technique can just bring it all right back. But I don't think he can use RCT right now because he is so drained and he is so unable to use curse techniques at the moment. But it also doesn't make sense because he was also just able to pull off even if it's incomplete, another domain within the unlimited void. A lot of like tiny little plot holes here, I think. But regardless, I still love how this fight is moving along. Immediately after the domain breaks and we see Sukuna flying out, we also see the trio of Yuji, Todo, and Gota that are jumping forward in order to fight and pursue Sukuna. Now we get a really cool scene of all 3 of them jumping forward out of the smoke. But I think something is done on purpose here because if you look at Gota's like forehead area, or where his eyes and forehead should be, where the scars are, they are not being shown. And for something so prevalent that just happened not too long ago, you think that you would show those scars or anything pertaining to Kenjaku's curse technique that was copied by Yuta in order to even make this all happen. I think that it may not be working the way that a lot of people thought it would. And I believe that my previous thought of how this could all work out may be coming to fruition. Because I remember saying that I don't believe that the brains actually swapped, because in the cursed copy technique that Yuta has, he doesn't necessarily take on or has to fulfill the prerequisites for the curse technique to happen. Sometimes it's like a cheap copy, kind of like with the curse speech technique, how he's able to use the megaphone instead. So he's not actually doing it himself. He's kind of taking a loophole to get there. And I think we're going to see the same thing here. I think that the soul of Yuta was transported into Gojo's body, but I don't think his brain was. I think that Rika is still haunting Yuta's body, which is still intact and put back together and ready for his soul to come back to it. And this also makes sense because Kenjaku in the past has only ever taken over dead bodies where the soul has left the body. When he took over Suguru Geto's body, it seems that Suguru's soul was strong enough to still cling to his body and still try and reside, where we saw that scene in Shibuya where he actually fought back against Kenjaku for a moment. So we've never actually seen Kenjaku take out the brain and put it into another body. I figure that would be really hard because he would need to be transferred over to the other body already in order to grab the brain and put it in, or he needs to cut off his own head, take his brain out, take theirs out, and then put it in and make that work. I don't think any of that is how it's supposed to work. I think that because of the binding vow that he has in order to make the curse technique work, if you remember with the forehead stitches, this is a binding vow that he must have in order to show that he is taken over the body. This is part of the curse technique, not necessarily a scar from the transition of the brain. And it also makes sense that he would just take over their brain, his soul would imprint onto the brain. because how else could he access the memories of the body that he is taking over, as he's shown in the past, being able to use the curse techniques and being able to remember things from their past? If he took the brain out and completely replaced it with his, this really wouldn't make sense. You need the brain to access the memories. So it makes way more sense that his curse technique imbues his soul over to that brain, and the mouth that you see on the brain and also the scars is a result of the curse technique, and showing other people or giving them a hint that he has taken over the body, because that's part of the curse technique. He's giving up being incognito, taking over people's body in exchange for actually having enough power to make the curse technique work. Pretty long rant for not being able to see some forehead scars on Gota, but let's keep moving forward. Toto yells out to Gota, as soon as you can start firing off hollow purples again, just go ahead and start spamming them, because it won't hit us. I'll keep switching us out of the way with Boogie Woogie. And, you know, it's perfect because you're not going to risk hitting any one of them. He can just kind of fire them off indiscriminately. And we're also at a state yet again to where Sukuna will not be able to use his curse techniques anymore, because he has enacted his domain expansion way too many times at this point. And I know that he is probably just going to pull off another binding vow of he's not allowed to have avocado toast on Tuesdays before 11 a.m. in exchange for being able to use his domain expansion now. It's going to be that stupid. It seems to be that dumb, and he's spamming the hell out of them. It just doesn't, it takes away the seriousness of binding vows, for me at least. In the next scene, we see that due to Gota using the domain expansion, he's actually completely burned out of his curse energy, and the body collapses because Kenjaku's curse technique is over, even before the 5 minutes of his original copy technique, because it expended so much of the energy and burned it out. He kind of exchanged time for power. So Gota falls flat, and yet again in that scene, his hair is just a little bit too much in the way for us to see any kind of scars or anything. But I do think the scars are gone, because I think that the theory is correct, that they are not actual surgical scars. Those are just there to show the technique is enacted. Apparently Yuta thinks that there was some kind of trick or some kind of loophole that Kenjaku was pulling, because he was able to use domain expansion after domain expansion and still keep his technique running. So there had to be some way to restart his technique after domain expansion had burned out the cursed energy. And Yuta didn't take any of that information whenever he copied the technique from Kenjaku, which he normally would take that information in order to make the copy technique work properly. But because he can't keep going, he can at least, though, keep the barrier running of the domain expansion that had exploded. Tiny little shards of that barrier are all over the battleground, but that is still his barrier. Even though it's not super strong, even though it's not broken through, even though it's not connected, it is still there and is able to give the good guys a little bit more support somehow. Let this be a lesson to all you Glazers and all you fanboys out there. Do not fanboy in the middle of a fight, because Toto starts praising Sukuna, saying, I guess where the king of curses, why we're having such a hard time, and immediately gets black flashed. Yet again, Sukuna with the black flash. It doesn't feel as cool or as predominant whenever Sukuna does it, because it just seems like an ass pull in order to get his curse energy back going again. He can just do it whenever he wants, apparently. The reason that I like when Yuji can do it, because Yuji doesn't have anything else. That he is just chosen by the black sparks, and he is able to enact black flash whenever he wants. Not whenever he wants, just very frequently. He's a lot more apt to be able to pull it off, but that's all that Yuji has. Sukuna has everything else and now this, and it's just like, when does it end? But we see here in this black flash that Toto's vibra slap that was connected to his arm is broken. It is broken off, but the only thing that's broken off is the handle part on top. A lot of people are forgetting how a vibra slap works. So I'll put up a picture of it. It has the handle, and then it has the bell down at the bottom, and it goes. Now, that wooden box, it is not dependent on that handle in order for it to work. It is dependent on these very small pieces of metal that are inside the wooden box to slap back and forth. So if he's able to hit that on anything else and enact the vibration, it still works as it should. Now it just makes it a little harder, or just not nearly as effective, but he can still enact it. Without missing a beat, as soon as Toto gets launched away by the Black Flash, Yuji is already on Sukuna's 6 and ready to strike. The Vibra Slap hits and Yuji is transported to the other side of Sukuna just in time for him to react to his feint. As we know, Sukuna has had the most trouble out of all the curse techniques that fight against. He has had the most trouble against Boogie Woogie because it is absolutely unpredictable and you can't ever adapt to it since he can change how many times he wants to swap, how quick he wants to swap, how far he wants to swap. You have no idea what he could pull. And so Sukuna really has no way to adapt and learn this technique in order to counteract it. Now remember how we talked about the shards of the barrier floating in the air. Now each one of those shards is imbued with cursed energy. And if you remember how Boogie Woogie works, Boogie Woogie can swap anything that has a cursed energy signature within his range. So every one of these shards Yuji can actually be switched with, or Toto, or anything else that Toto desires to be switched with. But now his options are almost limitless to how many shards of this barrier are floating around them. It's actually the most prime, perfect battleground situation for Boogie Woogie to work. And I kind of thought of this too in the past. What's to say that Toto couldn't take a bag of sand or a bag of sawdust or anything like that, or even a bag of talcum powder, and he can imbue cursed energy into every single particle of that bag just by holding the bag and doing it. Then once he throws it up in the air, he has limitless options in which he can switch in between. That's something I always thought that he could do, and I'm really glad that this idea is being taken at least this far. I absolutely love it. We get a scene of like a whole bunch of shadow clones, or at least after images of Yuji all around Sukuna about to strike him from every position on the compass. And this just could be a showing of how many times that he is being swapped in between before the one move hits because of Boogie Woogie. As we know, he can switch 50 times a second. So these could all just be Yuji ready to punch at once, and we're just kind of getting the representation of how quickly he's being thrown around the battlefield around Sukuna before he strikes to completely confuse Sukuna. He kind of tricks Sukuna though, because it looks like he's about to throw a punch. He's like kind of rearing up. It's a Ken, or it's it's just a really powerful punch. But he ends up reaching out with an open palm and placing it on Sukuna's body. And when he does this, he's about to enact Dismantle. Some people I've seen think this is kind of cheap, that he is actually able to use Dismantle. Now, when he's using Dismantle, though, he is not targeting the body of Sukuna. He's actually targeting the realm between the souls of Sukuna and Megumi. He's targeting that in order to separate them completely. And he says, I don't care how many times it takes, I'll do it until I save you, Megumi. Now, Yuji is selectively attacking that barrier in between the souls. Some people think that this is a little bit too much, that he's able to selectively pick where he wants to attack within the body with this new technique he just learned. But I think we have to keep in mind and remember that Yuji is the best person in this entire series that is able to see the outline of the soul. He can see it almost as well as he can see a body. And he's one of the only people that can do this besides Mahito. So if anybody would be able to attack that barrier directly without being able to see it, it would be Yuji. And Dismantle is the perfect kind of way to do that. And I believe he's able to do this through a binding vow. And he's able to do this binding vow through a vow with himself. And as you guys know, whenever you make a binding vow with yourself, if you break that binding vow, you only lose what is gained from the vow. It's nothing against you actually, because it's not made with another person. Now, that kind of sucks, because if you break the vow, you can just make the vow again and keep doing it. But I really don't mind this, because out of all the plot armor and ass pulls that Sukuna has gotten, I feel like we need a few in order to make it seem at least kind of fair. Sukuna says if he keeps taking these blows, he's not going to be able to maintain this body, and he will lose. And while he's feeling this pain, he actually coughs up some of the fingers that he's ingested instead of coughing up blood. So you can see that his pull and his bind on the body are starting to weaken, because with every single finger that Sukuna took in, his power would increase and his control over the body would increase. So I guess these fingers are a representation of him starting to lose control of the body that he's taken over. We can see here that Yuji definitely doesn't lose Dismantle because of that binding vow. He's able to use Dismantle on a kind of column or pillar that Sukuna is standing on, and he's able to completely destroy it and cut right through it with his perforated scissor lines. So Yuji goes in for a follow-up punch as Sukuna is falling from that pillar. And as he's doing that, Sukuna, of course, is able to dodge midair, and he's able to get around the backside of Yuji where he's able to knock him into a wall. This is where Sukuna starts to have some inner dialogue, saying that if he's able to avoid those attacks from Yuji, they will have nothing else as effective in order to break him down and slowly break the barrier to where he will definitely lose. As those two continue the fight, we also get some inner dialogue from Todo as those two fight, and he says that if his spare Vibra Slap that he puts on his arm isn't recognized as the cursed tool that he made the binding vow with, that his Boogie Woogie still won't be able to work. So he says, I need to use this one at least one more time. Todo lifts up his arm and he smacks down the Vibra Slap to give one more Boogie Woogie out of this one. He yells, take this, and no swap. Everyone was standing there waiting for the swap, but nothing happened in the fight. It looks like Boogie Woogie is dead. At least, it looks like it in their eyes, because the swap wasn't meant for anyone on the battlefield right now. Since the range was dramatically extended because of the binding vow that Todo made, he wasn't looking to transport someone within this fight in front of him. Rather, he was looking to bring someone else to the battlefield. And we can see the absolute shock and terror in Sukuna's face as he realizes what is happening when he looks up and sees Hana getting ready to unleash a maximum output Jacob's ladder from right above him. We then get a flashback to Yuta talking to Hana within Shoko's infirmary and saying that they may need to rely on Angel for their final attack against Sukuna because of the nature of Angel's attack and the devastation it would have upon him. Yuta says it's good that you're going to stay off the battlefield because we need to use you in order to have that final blow attack against Sukuna, maximum output Jacob's ladder. And this maximum output Jacob's ladder will be the final attempt in order to split Sukuna and Megumi's souls apart. Yuta says the beauty of his copy technique is that whenever he uses copy technique, no one usually remembers that the original user is still available to unleash the attack as well. He used Jacob's ladder before, which devastated Sukuna and brought him down to a level in which they could all fight him. But they completely forgot that Hana is still alive, still exists with Angel, and is still able to perform that as her natural curse technique. He says that he believes this happens because people kind of correlate it with him taking the technique and not copying it. So they think if this person has a technique, they don't think about the original person still having it. The strength of copy is having the same card in your hand at the same time, two of the same card. And that's whenever maximum output Jacob's ladder is beamed onto the field, and it looks big. It looks like maybe a block to 2 blocks wide. It's hitting this place very bigly. And it says in the 11th hour they play their trump card. Now also, I heard some people making a good point with Jacob's ladder. If it's supposed to expel 2 souls from one body or destroy evil or anything like that, we can't forget that Gota's body is laying on the battlefield within this vicinity right now. If Gojo's soul and anything is present within this body, it may expel Yuta's soul back to his original body, and that would leave a perfectly good body for Gojo's soul to inhabit and take back over yet again. I know that I am huffing the copium with this. I know that's probably Gojo over, but there is still a chance. And while there's still a chance, I'm still going to bring it up. Because why not? I miss him. We are on break next week for the next chapter, but please tell me what you guys thought. Tell me what your theories are. I want to get as much rolling in the comment section as I can because I am starting to get really excited for the good guys side. Finally, it looks like things might be going our way just a little bit. So please throw in something for the conversation. Let's get it going. I'm Enemy Okage. See you later.